My name is Peter, and I'm a parishioner at Mary, Queen of the Apostles Parish in Salem, Massachusetts. And this is my weekly personal reflection on the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. Now, the readings this week and next end the liturgical year with a hard topic: the end of the world and the second coming of Jesus. Because of the topic, this week I'll start my reflection with a warning and a disclaimer. So I've not checked to verify that what I'm about to say actually conforms to the teachings of the Catholic Church. This is just a reflection based on my own personal observations. So Sunday's reading begins with Jesus saying a curious phrase: "In those days after that tribulation." And he says that after that tribulation, the heavens go away, and the Son of Man will come in the clouds, and he'll send out the angels to gather his elect. Now, to give this gospel some context, let's back up a few verses in the Gospel of Mark. We read that Jesus and the apostles were on a hill opposite the temple area in Jerusalem, and Jesus predicted out loud to them about the destruction of the temple. Now, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked Jesus privately about the end times. And the first part of today's gospel is part of Jesus' answer to them. Now, in the section of the Gospel of Mark just before today's reading, Jesus described that tribulation mentioned at the beginning of the reading. Jesus said it is the worst time that the world will ever see, and that we should basically run for the hills. But Jesus tells us that this period is short for the sake of the believers, and then Jesus comes into his glory. So that tribulation starts when you see the desolating abomination standing where he should not. So what is that? Now, my own Bible has a note that it probably refers to the Roman destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD, and that this entire passage in the Gospel of Mark is about exhorting the church through the trials that they would confront. But it also notes that Jesus was quoting the Old Testament prophet Daniel. Now, the passage of Daniel is generally understood to describe a desecration of the temple in Jerusalem about 200 years before Jesus' ministry. Jesus then uses that passage to predict the destruction of the temple by the Romans. But I was wondering, both those events relate to the temple in Jerusalem, which represents the Old Covenant. Now, I wondered if these events should foreshadow something even greater in the New Covenant. And I also wondered if the desolating abomination is standing where he should not, then who or what was supposed to be there instead? Now, interestingly, the prophet Daniel says this, and this is chapter 9, verse 27. "He shall abolish sacrifice and offering, and in their place shall be the desolating abomination." Now, since in the Old Covenant, the desolating abomination replaced true sacrifice and offering in the temple with pagan idols, then maybe, and now just maybe, in the New Covenant, the desolating abomination arises when the Eucharist is abolished. Now, this could only happen if there were no more bishops to ordain priests and no more priests to offer Mass. The faithful would be left with no way to receive Jesus' glorified body, blood, soul, and divinity present in the Eucharist. Now, because Jesus is truly present in the Eucharist, then no more Eucharist would be like the absence of God. Humankind would have abolished the Eucharist and would have handed over all power to all sorts of idols or false gods, putting them in the place of the true God, leaving someone standing where he should not. But after a short period of time, Jesus would then come into his glory. Now, while I could be completely wrong about this connection between the Eucharist and the tribulation, what I like about this explanation is this. Take a giant step back and look at the entire story of salvation history, from the beginning of creation in Genesis to the end, such as described in today's Gospel. God is constantly pursuing us and wanting to be with us. From when Adam and Eve hid after their first sin, throughout the entire Old Testament, God came after us to be with us. And then from the incarnation of Jesus through his death and resurrection, God came after us and was with us. And then after his ascension, and for us and for our times, Jesus chose to be with us in the Eucharist. And even if the Eucharist were somehow abolished, what today's Gospel tells us is Jesus would immediately come again to be with us. So, when you worship at Mass this Sunday, whether you can give yourself to Jesus and receive Jesus in the Eucharist in person, or if you perform a spiritual communion, or even if you're not presenting yourself for communion, look up at the Blessed Host and see Jesus wanting to be with you. And pray for our bishops and for vocations to the priesthood. May God bless you, and see you next week.